Third bloody night in Bruges. Another atrocious murder.
Young girls, all of them, with gaping wounds in their neck, exactly like the others. And every time, not a trace of blood anywhere.
Malpertuis wordt wie van een nieuwe wereld. Zeg mij wat er hier aan de hand is.
Ik mag je niet zeggen.
Ik ga wel alleen op zoek naar het geheim van Malpertuis.
En God weet, wat zul je vinden? Wat zul je vinden?
Hello, welcome back to Desperate Living, and yes, if you're a regular viewer, once again I have to apologise. It's been a while. Things have happened, daytime work, which ironically involves doing much the same thing that I'm doing here, but for rather more money, so it's been taking up a bit of my time. Anyway, enough excuses, and on to today's movies. What better way to return to action, as it might be, than with a pair of magnificent Harry Kumel films from the beginning of the 1970s, both now released through Radiance. Daughters of Darkness, which I imagine quite a few of you will be familiar with, and Malpertuis, which I imagine quite a few of you won't be familiar with. But believe me when I say that both of these are essential purchases. Let's begin with Daughters of Darkness. As I say, it's the better known of the two. It's a well-established horror classic. A film that emerged in an interesting time for the vampire movie. 1971. At this stage, the traditional Hammer Gothic, which I am a big fan of, I'm not going to argue with that, was pretty much on its last legs. The whole concept had been run into the ground, and although Hammer had made some effort to update it, particularly with The Vampire Lovers, Lust for a Vampire and Twins of Evil, it still felt a little bit old hat compared to some of the other genre films that were around at the time. You think about how 1968 had brought us Night of the Living Dead, Witchfinder General, Rosemary's Baby. Suddenly the traditional old Hammer film began to feel a bit dated. What had been very daring in the mid to late 50s now felt very tame and quite restrained. Within that context, a new generation of vampire movie filmmakers emerged, and although their movies are all very different from each other, you can see a continual thread, I think, through the works of Jean Rollin, Jess Franco, and in this particular film, Harry Kumel. I know that some people might be raising their eyebrows when I mention Franco and Rollin in the same breath as this particular film. Notably, many years ago when Mark Gatiss did his documentary on Euro horror, he ignored those two filmmakers because he didn't like them, but did a lot of coverage of Daughters of Darkness. Well, more fool him, because if you can't see the connection between all three filmmakers, or at least all three vampire movies, let's say pretty much everything that Rollin was doing in the early 70s, Franco's movies like Vampiros Lesbos and Virgin Among the Living Dead, Female Vampire, and Daughters of Darkness, then I don't know what to say. I mean, to me, it just screams out that they're all coming out of the same kind of weirdly arty, weirdly erotic, weirdly subversive world where everything is decadent, everything is decaying. A film like this is full of what feels like end-of-the-line vampiric ennui, I suppose, from the main characters, particularly from Delphine Seyreg's main character, who brings to the film, obviously, a bit of, I don't know what you would call it, longing, regret, the idea that whatever she was, she is in this film essentially playing Countess Bathory, the infamous Countess Dracula character, although she passes herself off as a descendant, but she's clearly supposed to be the same character. She's been around for, I guess, for centuries, and has seen and done everything, and now she gets her kicks out of meeting fresh new people and corrupting them. Now, the whole film is the story of sexual corruption, and if you know anything about this movie but haven't seen it, you probably think you know what that might be. And to a degree, you'd be right, but this isn't quite the lesbian feminist narrative that people have suggested. It certainly is that to a degree, but it's also a film that's more about pitting two people, namely the young couple that encounter the Countess and her young her young lover, in a rundown seaside hotel in the middle of winter. At first it seems that the man is going to be more susceptible, but as it goes on, she manages to bring out an inner darkness in the apparently innocent young woman. This is a movie that when I first saw it, I wasn't necessarily a huge fan. It was a film that I could admire but not particularly enjoy. I'm not quite sure why that was, looking back at it now. Certainly in subsequent viewings and looking at this gorgeous new disc, then the film is unquestionably a masterpiece. It's certainly a film where you have to delve into its own world and accept it on those values. And if you approach this expecting it to be a vampire movie, to be a horror movie, to be a sexy movie, you'll probably be disappointed. While it is all three of those things, it's never enough of those things to satisfy an audience looking for that kind of thing. Part of the problem was that all the critiques of this film that I'd read before I saw it for the first time did very much emphasise the idea that it was a sexy, kinky, erotic and bloody movie. But it's not. Certainly not by the standards of even its contemporaries. It does have those elements in it, but they're not what the film's all about.
Silly tales about ghouls chased away by garlic and vampires shrinking from crosses.
She kidnapped young girls and kept them chained to give blood. Blood for her to bathe in and drink. And she bit them everywhere.
No.
And then she pushed white-hot pokers into their faces. And when they parted their lips to scream, she shoved the flaming rod up into their mouths.
Stop it. Blood. Beautiful red. Stop it! Around. My legs.
So Harry Kumel's direction is imaginative. Everything has a sheen of decayed beauty across it that just makes the whole film fascinating to look at. It's perhaps not as gorgeous as Malpertuis, which we'll have a look at in a moment, but it's certainly got its own style. And as I said, I think it fits in very well with those slightly erotic or sometimes extremely erotic Euro vampire films of the early 1970s that were playing with the genre, redefining what we know as a vampire movie, and also sitting somewhere between the art house and the exploitation grindhouse to be their own unique thing. So if you're a fan of Roland and Franco, I think you'll definitely like this. Equally, if you're a fan of this film and you haven't really paid much attention to either Franco or Roland, I suggest giving them a go, because if you like this and if you get the vibe of this movie and it speaks to you, I think you'll like a lot of their stuff from the same period. So let's have a look at the Radiance edition. This is a new UHD and Blu-ray edition. So both discs included here. Comes with the OB strip, which as you can see is stuck onto the back there. You can then remove that and have a very pure cover. Using these to get all the kind of BBFC certification nonsense out of the way is a great way of complying with the law while at the same time not destroying your cover art. The cover of the actual disc is very minimalist. So you have two discs there, and yes, it's a double-sided cover, so you can have either the one that has no text on it other than the spine, or you can have one that is essentially an actual sleeve with pretty cool artwork. For now, I'm going to leave it as it came. But if you've watched this channel before, you'll know that I like nothing more than to swap the artwork of a sleeve out. So again, as we've discussed on previous discs, these booklets themselves are substantial affairs and, you know, work as standalone books as well as an accompaniment to the film. So like as with many of these booklets, it's a collection of essays, it's not one individual piece. This cover art on the box I think is great, really impressive, and the way the whole thing is put together is just beautiful. It's, you know, I really appreciate when these labels, and I think we can include most of the boutique labels now, make a real effort with the whole packaging, because if we're going to buy physical media, we want it to look nice. It's not just about the film. The film is great, obviously the film is the most important thing, but if we were just interested in watching the film, there's probably opportunities to do that through streaming services. Not always, obviously, but I think if you package something up that looks really nice, collector's edition, I suppose, and I hate saying that because I don't want to sound like one of those kind of wanky collector fanboys who just, you know, buy stuff because it's there, not because they've got any interest in the film, often don't even take them out of the shrink wrap. You know the sort. But I do think that having these films look so nice, put together with such care, it speaks well for the labels and it makes them much more desirable, because of course these are not necessarily cheap discs, particularly when you get a UHD. Malpertuis, not as you might think, and as I often used to call it, Malpertuis, is Kumel's follow-up to Daughters of Darkness, but a very, very different kind of film, and one that's had a difficult time over the years with different cuts. There was a very rushed edit for the Cannes Film Festival, and after that point it was very hard to put together what might have been considered a proper director's cut. But again, it's an extraordinary film, noted for its kind of interesting cast. It includes Orson Welles, who spends the entire film, or his entire time in the film, in bed. Susan Hampshire, who you wouldn't necessarily associate with the kind of weird, experimental, arty genre movies, but there she is. And a great supporting cast, if you can call them that. It's more of an ensemble cast, to be honest. Unlike Daughters of Darkness, which is presented in English and clearly was filmed in English, this movie is in Flemish with English subtitles. So Malpertuis is a weird, twisting movie. I've referred to the film in the booklet inside, and, you know, just cards on the table. I wrote one of the essays for the booklet that's in here. I called it transcendental cinema because I think it fits in. While Daughters of Darkness is a movie that sits alongside the Franco and the Roland movies, the vampire movies, in feel, I think this also sits alongside them in a strange way, as well as other films such as some of the Fellini films of the 60s, Satyricon and Juliet of the Spirits, The Hourglass Sanatorium, a lot of the underground arty genre pieces of the early 1970s. This isn't a horror film. This is, well, it is a horror film, but it's a weird, twisted fairy tale, a dream within a dream within a dream. Without wanting to give away spoilers, it might not actually show events that have happened, or it might show events that have happened. So another film that this reminds me of very much is the Mexican movie The Mansion of Madness, or as it was released as in the US, Dr. Tar's Torture Dungeon. Not a way to encourage people to take the film seriously, you might think. But that itself is another kind of weird, experimental, arty, creepy, trippy, dreamy genre film that I can't imagine what people thought of that film if they went to see it expecting something that would fit into Dr. Tar's Torture Dungeon, quite frankly. And this feels very much like that. It's a movie that I can't really tell you too much about what happens, because whatever I say is effectively going to be a spoiler. What I can say is that it all takes place in a house called Malpertuis, which is run by Casavius, played by Orson Welles, who seems to be keeping the various oddball residents of the house somehow under his control, even as he breathes his last.
Malpertuis, ça signifie le repère du renard. Le renard, bien sûr, c'est le diable.
Des ombres. Il est si noble, si généreux et si bon.
Allons, je le sais que vous me haïssez.
Ironically, Delphine Seyrig, who is in Daughters of Darkness, was also in last year at Marienbad, one of my favourite movies, and it's a movie that reminds me very much, again, of Malpertuis, or maybe the other way around. Malpertuis reminds me very much, again, of last year at Marienbad. And I first saw this film on, I think it was on Channel 4 in the UK, probably back in the 1980s, when Channel 4 in the UK still showed films like this. And I was blown away. You know, there was never any point with this movie where I didn't get it or didn't think it was all that. This film was amazing, and I still think that of the two films, you know, absolutely you want to buy them both. But Malpertuis is definitely the more interesting, and it's definitely the one that people haven't seen. It's not really had that much of a release in comparison to Daughters of Darkness, that has at least been out in different editions over the years. This has, and it has been released before. This isn't like its international debut or anything, but it's certainly not been seen nearly as much. Once again, it's got a really nice cover. This one, unfortunately, although it's a new 4K restoration and probably the most complete version that will ever be available, which means that it even includes a few freeze frames here and there while the dialogue and the picture kind of catch up with each other, because that's the only way it's been able to be restored. Sadly, it's only on Blu-ray. I say only on Blu-ray, like that really matters. It would have been nice to see this on UHD, because I think just that slight extra push would have been impressive, because it's a gorgeous movie. You know, I don't want it to be seen as the second division film in this pairing by any means. So once again, very minimalist main sleeve, and yeah, nice cover art and text there. The booklet, again, fantastic cover. Same page count, I'm guessing. Yep, 80 pages. Once again, beautifully put together, a really nice book. So between these two movies, you get a 160 page book on Harry Kumel's fantastic films. Kumel's an interesting director in that he never really did anything else like this. I mean, he worked quite a bit, and he worked on a lot of stuff, but funnily enough, he was working at the Dutch Film Academy as a teacher in Amsterdam when my old buddy Ian Kirchhoff, now Arian Kaganoff, was there. I had Kumel's phone number, should have interviewed him, but at the time it was, you know, I didn't quite know what I was going to do with that interview. But yeah, I really regret it. I mean, it's not like he's dead, he's still alive, and he's actually included on the extras in here. So I can't really recommend this pair to you highly enough. These are both brilliant films. If you're into, I guess, the kind of more experimental side of genre cinema as it emerged in the late 60s and early 70s, then you will adore these two films. And when I say experimental side, I'm not talking particularly about kind of pretentious art house. I think these films, like the Francos, like the Rollins, like some of the other movies, including some of the movies that Radiance have also released, like Messiah of Evil, for instance, lots of the indie American films of the early 70s, they exist in their own world. They're not one thing nor the other. They're not art house, they're not exploitation, they're just their own movies. and all the better for that. So if you're interested in picking up these films, I'll actually include buying links for UK viewers in the description below. Any copy that you buy through that link helps this channel out ever so slightly. And similarly, if you've enjoyed this look at these films, then make sure to give this video a like. And also, of course, hit the alert bell, subscribe, share with friends, do all the things that help boost this in the bizarre and difficult to navigate YouTube algorithm. And of course, I'm interested in knowing what you think of these films. Do you have a particular favourite of the two? Or are you not a fan of Harry Kumel for whatever reason? But if so, I'm not quite sure why you've sat through all this, but stranger things have happened. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.